Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to talk architecture, but not buildings. We are building a fortress, a digital one, to really get a handle on operating system security. So, let's just jump right in with a question that honestly affects pretty much everyone. You get that shiny new laptop or server, you peel off the protective film, you're good to go, right? Just connect it to the internet and you're safe? And the answer? It's a big, fat no. Actually, it's worse than that. It's not just insecure, it's an immediate target. Sources show a system can get compromised during the installation process itself. We're talking before you even get a chance to download the latest security patches. So that brings us to our first idea, the vulnerable default. You gotta think of a standard, out-of-the-box operating system like a brand new castle. But the builders left all the gates unlocked and the drawbridge down for anyone to just wander in. See, a computer isn't just one thing. It's a stack of layers. And here's the part you really need to get. Each layer is totally at the mercy of the one below it. If someone can compromise your low-level code, your operating system can't be trusted. And if the OS is compromised, well, then none of your apps are safe. It's a chain of trust. Okay, so how do we start building our defenses? Well, it doesn't start with installing some fancy antivirus software. Nope. It begins with a plan. You'd never build a real fortress without a detailed blueprint, right? Your digital security is exactly the same. And this plan, this is your blueprint. It makes you answer the big questions right from the get-go. What is the system actually protecting? Who needs to get in? And what exactly do they need to be able to do once they're inside? How are we going to make sure they're really who they say they are? This is all about deciding who gets the keys to which rooms before you've even built the doors. And here's the bottom line. Doing all of this planning from day one is so much more effective and way, way cheaper than trying to bolt on security measures after the fact. Seriously, trying to secure a system that wasn't planned well is like trying to add a moat and high walls after the castle is already under attack. It's just not going to work well. All right, so we've got our blueprint. How do we turn that plan into real defenses? Well, this next phase is a process called hardening. This is where we go from paper plans to actual stone walls and reinforced gates. Hardening is a very deliberate process. First, you get the OS installed and fully patched up, preferably on a network that's isolated from the internet. Then, and this is a big one, you get rid of everything you don't absolutely need. Every extra program or service is another potential window an attacker could crawl through. After that, you set up your users and lock down permissions, configure your firewalls, and then you test it. You try to break in to make sure your defenses hold. Now, if you're wondering how much of a difference this all makes, well, check this out. This isn't just some academic idea. The Australian Signals Directorate, we're talking a major government intelligence agency here. They looked at real-world attacks and found that a few basic strategies could have stopped the overwhelming majority of them. Just let that number sink in. 85%. Think about that. This isn't about having the fanciest, most expensive security toys. It's about getting the fundamentals right. So, what are those magic fundamentals? Well, here they are, the top 4. First, application whitelisting. That means you decide what software is allowed to run, and everything else is blocked by default. Second, patch everything, all the time. Your OS, your apps, everything. Third, lock down those super powerful administrator accounts. People should only use them when they absolutely have to. And fourth, create defense in depth. That just means having multiple layers of security, so if one fails, another one might catch the attacker. And this idea right here, it really gets to the heart of that remove unnecessary step we talked about. Every single program on a computer is a potential way in for an attacker. By shrinking the amount of software that's installed and allowed to run, you are literally shrinking your attack surface. You're giving them fewer doors to even try and knock on. Okay, so building the fortress is a huge accomplishment, but guess what? The job's not done. Not even close. Now you have to maintain it. It's a never-ending watch. You have to patrol the walls, look for trouble, and make sure your emergency supplies are stocked. This is where logging comes in. Think of logs as your watchtower's journal. Now, it's a reactive control, meaning it won't stop an attack as it's happening. But, and this is a huge but, if you do get breached, those logs are absolutely mission critical. They're the clues that let you piece together what happened, how they got in, and what they did. Without good logs, you're just flying blind in a crisis.
And speaking of emergency supplies, let's talk about your data. It's so important to know the difference between backups and archives. Backups are for short-term recovery. Think server crashes or someone accidentally deleting a critical file. Archives? That's about long-term storage, keeping records for months or years to meet legal rules or company policy. They seem similar, but they serve totally different jobs.
And this is a perfect example of why having the right strategy is so important. This real-world attack is just a brutal lesson. The bad guys didn't just wipe out the live websites, they were smart enough to find and destroy all of the online backups too. For any customer who didn't have their own separate offline copy, everything was gone, forever. A complete catastrophic failure of planning.
Now, let's shift gears and tackle a much more modern challenge: virtualization. You can think of this as trying to defend multiple, completely separate fortresses that are all built on the exact same piece of land.
So, what is virtualization? At its core, it's a technology that lets one single physical computer pretend to be many separate computers. Each of these is called a virtual machine, or VM, and each VM gets its own simulated hardware and runs its own copy of an operating system. And the whole show is managed by a special piece of software called a hypervisor.
And there are basically two main flavors of this. With native virtualization, that hypervisor runs directly on the bare metal hardware. It is the foundation. With hosted virtualization, you have a regular OS first, like Windows or Linux, and the hypervisor runs just like any other app on top of it. Generally, the native approach is seen as more secure because, well, there are just fewer layers for an attacker to try and exploit.
But this whole new way of doing things creates new security problems. The absolute biggest one is isolation, making sure a problem or an attacker in one virtual machine can't cross over and affect the others. You also have to protect the hypervisor itself because it has basically godlike access to everything running on it. And then there's the nightmare scenario, a VM escape. That's when an attacker breaks out of their little virtual box and takes control of the hypervisor and, by extension, every other VM on that machine. And all of this leaves us with a really fundamental question to think about. As our systems get more and more layered, more abstract, from apps on an OS to an OS in a VM to a VM on a hypervisor, are we actually building stronger, more secure fortresses? Or are we just building these incredibly complex labyrinths that have become maybe impossible to truly defend? That right there is one of the biggest challenges in security today.